Good morning, good afternoon, good evening guys, gals and gentlepods, and welcome back to the big workshop with Morty. So I've finally got the engine fully assembled. You may remember in the last video I had a problem with the Payen BK450 gasket leaking coolant. Apparently this is a known issue with big valve heads, basically a 1275 head on a small bore block. Not something I've ever experienced before. I fitted a Victor Reinz gasket without the Loctite spray and it's holding coolant, so I'm happy for that to go ahead. So it's all looking good. She's about ready, needs a good wash, got a lot of workshop dust on it. She's loaded up on the trailer. I've made a few little mods in the engine bay which I'll show you now. Right, so one of the most obvious things is the intake trumpets on the carb. As you'll remember from the last video, the rear one was very close. You could barely get a fag paper between it and this structure. And although the engine is pretty rock solid on these new mounts I've made, there is always going to be a tiny amount of movement. So these are 3D printed in PLA plastic, shorter intake trumpets. So that resolves that issue. And as you'll see, I've also added a heat shield. It's just this piece of stainless steel sheet, bent quite simply just to fit around the manifold. It's just screwed into the bottom of the inlet manifold, and that should just help to keep the heat of the exhaust away from the carburettor to prevent fuel vaporization. And it'll also help to keep the heat away from these plastic trumpets. PLA melts at around 200, 220 Celsius, but it does start to go soft somewhere around the 80, 90 degree mark. I've also got a cold air intake which simply feeds fresh air from the front up towards the intakes of the carb. So that should sort that. That's about it. We're about ready for the first event, which is April the 5th at Lowton Park, Members Practice Day. I haven't put an entry in yet, I must get on and do that. Today is the 7th of February, so I've got roughly 2 months and we're all good to go. Now you might be wondering why there's a battery box hanging on the side of the trailer, and that is simply because I have also fitted a motor mover to the trailer. So I thought about fitting a trailer mover, a caravan mover, motor mover, whatever you want to call them, to this trailer since I bought it, but I've never really been convinced of the value compared to the cost of the unit. And the only reason I've done it now is because I had one given to me. So when I checked it all out, it was in perfect working order. There's the remote for it, just needed a battery, which is why the battery box is on the side of the trailer. And it will rarely, if ever, be used at an event, because I rarely, if ever, unhitch the trailer from the motorhome. I generally tend to leave it hooked up to the motorhome. The advantage of it for me is easy manoeuvring within the workshop. I can now put the trailer exactly where I want it very easily with the remote control. So it's as simple as that. So this is not a very long video, just a brief update. I just felt it was worth just bringing up to speed with where I got to, and finally showing you that I've got the engine all built up and it's running and it keeps coolant inside, and we'll see how the season goes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.